you're going to start your normal day again, right? You're going to start doing the things that you usually do, the things that you have to do to make a living, to survive. You are back to your routine. Now, in the case that your team loses, then maybe you won't be celebrating for the night. You won't be celebrating that night, definitely. But then the next day, you will do the same thing, right? You will get back to your routine and you start anew, you start afresh. So this is just an example, just a small example, a little example of how serious we take victory, yet it doesn't, that victory may not mean so much. The feeling, the good feeling you get from getting victory is so short, you know. The time that happiness, that good feeling you get from getting victory, it has an expiry date, right? It has a due date, and it doesn't last forever. And likewise, the feeling of losing, right? Of not winning the game, that doesn't feel good, obviously. No one likes losing. But after you lose, you're not happy. But also, that also has a time limit, you know. Gradually, then it goes away. So like this, then losing, you know, defeat and victory in other aspects of your life, of our life, is somewhat similar. You get what you want in life, like let's say there is a competition for getting something, and if you win that, you feel like you achieved something, right? You feel like you are someone, no? There's a feeling of, what's the word? Elation, right? You feel elevated, right? Just your being, your ego, everything rises, you know? And it seems like you feel like you're top of the world, right? Top of the world. But even if you still have that object or that, you know, whatever it was that you were hoping for, whatever it was that you were trying to achieve, even if you have that for a day, for 2 days, 3 days, you know, if you count the days, then gradually this feeling of being top of the world gradually vanishes, you know, it decreases, and gradually it just vanishes, and then it is replaced by something else, right? So how we see defeat, how we see victory is very important. And how we even use those terms, you know, victory and defeat. Because sometimes by being defeated or by not getting the thing you wanted gives you an opportunity to get something else, right? By not getting what you really wanted, then obviously you have to start looking somewhere. And option B could be much better than option A. When you look back in time, then you might start to look back in your life and say, that was actually a good thing that I didn't get option A. There are, I think, many examples. So at that moment, it may feel like defeat, but defeat could also become a victory. It could, and vice versa, right? Victory could also become a defeat of sorts. So we have to think, we have to really get a perspective of the situation, a perspective of our life. We cannot just think short term, It's important that we think long term, that we really think it thoroughly. Not just look at the matter at hand, not just look at the situation, but try to look around it, try to look at the other things, try to look at what could have happened, Something worse could have happened. Your situation could have been even worse. So like this, then, if you think like this, then I think defeat and victory, then use the polarization between those two, that becomes less, right? And as that polarization becomes less, then the strong desire for victory and the strong feeling of not accepting defeat, they both gradually lose their intensity. In this context, that I will practice accepting defeat. Yeah, I will practice accepting defeat. I think defeat here means you could interpret it many different ways. But I think accepting defeat is letting go of self-concern, right? Letting go of your desires, letting go of your concern, what you want, letting go of your dream, letting go of your dream. Sometimes we have dreams or we have some wish by which if we work towards realizing them, it would mean bringing much pain to others, right? Because we were so engrossed in just wanting that so much that we were willing to abandon any sense of concern for others and their happiness. So in those situations, then this is what it means, that we should let go, that we should let go and accept defeat. So this is the meaning of practicing accepting defeat. Yeah? And offering the victory to others. For our worldly thoughts, our self-cherishing thoughts, we are so concerned about just our needs, our wants. When I say our, I mean each of us, like me, not like us, but our, right? So with this approach, in getting some pleasure, in getting some moment of happiness, then we are harming others in this process of being just happy, of being just happy. I think this is one way of interpreting this teaching. In this context, then, here it says very clearly what defeat means, right? When others mistreat me, I offer victory, I accept defeat. So not reacting to their negative action in a similar way, right? Not reacting negatively to the mistreatment. If a person mistreats us, with verbal abuse, and if we react in a negative way, then it doesn't help the situation, because just by that negative reaction, our situation has worsened, right? Before the abuse, we were in a maybe happy state or more neutral state of mind. But if we react negatively, then obviously our mind is in a more negative state. Anger has crept in, and with anger, you cannot be happy and be angry at the same time. So even though the other person's negative action in a way was the condition of our anger, it's still not the real cause of our anger. The cause of our anger is within us, right? The negative action of the other person plays a role in the rising of our negative emotion, but it is still not the real cause. It is not the substantial cause, right? That is within us. Because there could be two situations. Maybe if we are in a neutral state of mind, or maybe we didn't have the best day, in that moment, if someone abuses us, as we are passing on the street, then it is more likely that we will react negatively. Whereas if we had a very good day, if our team won the final, right, and we are going out, celebrating, and if someone, says some bad things to us on the streets, we might just like whatever, we might just not really let it affect us, We thought, I'm having a good day. This is time for celebration, I'll just forget it, right? So you see, just those abusive words, they don't have like, those abusive words don't have the end say. End say? No. They don't have the last word, sorry. They don't have the last word they don't have the last word in causing, in causing anger. Defeat and victory is something that we can choose voluntarily, and reacting negatively is something that we can also choose. It's voluntary. We are not forced to become angry, No one can be forced to become angry. You can force someone and they might become angry, but they're not forced to become angry. So all angers are voluntary. And slender is is a different thing. When people, speak negatively about you, it's important that we don't let that affect us, right? Because you have to think logically that not everyone will appreciate our actions, not everyone will appreciate our behavior, our way of dressing, or the person that we are, who we are. Not everyone will probably appreciate that or accept that, right? If I say that they are slandering because of their misconceptions, then that may be a good way of not reacting so negatively towards them. But again, it seems like it's like you're sort of blaming them, right? Due to their misconceptions. So with that, then you could become a little arrogant, It's due to their misconception, but I don't have any problems, like I don't have any faults in me, but it's just due to their wrong way of seeing things. So if you think like this, then within yourself, then there's a danger that you are sort of raising yourself, right? Then you're sort of almost like becoming a Buddha, almost becoming like a Buddha. No faults, just perfect, a perfect human being, that thinking might solidify, this way of seeing oneself as being perfect with no faults. So here maybe it's good to think that could happen, that someone might not really appreciate me, I'm not perfect, right? I'm not perfect. I mean, I probably have some faults that people see. So if you just accept that, then I think that's good, You're good. So maybe this is a way of practicing Lojong. When you do that, when you accept defeat and when you give the victory to the other, then I would like to add, with that, then maybe it's a good thing to not tell people that you did that, right? That might be a good idea. Because these things, each of these verses that we went through, that we are going through, this is mainly for our practice, right? Mainly for our practice. It's not something that, it's not for display. It's not for sort of sharing, By sharing, I don't mean to say that we should not share the Dharma, but I mean to say more like we should not sort of advertise, what we did, advertise all the little virtuous things we have and the non-virtuous things that we might have overcome to a certain extent, So not advertise those good qualities. This is important. By being prideful of any virtuous deeds that we have committed, if one becomes arrogant, as a result of having accumulated some good deeds and overcoming some non-virtuous actions, then that sort of takes away the value, right? That takes away the value, the true worth of your virtuous deed. It's best to keep it a secret. Yeah? It's best to keep it a secret. And of course, you might have to share that with someone who, if you see, has a real interest in the Dharma and really wants some example, and who you know that if you can share with them, then it will benefit them, right? Now, in those cases, then there are exceptions, but generally, we should practice restraint, restraint from blowing our own trumpet, yeah, from talking about what we did, what good things we have done, and so forth. Because if you think about it, then blowing our own trumpet is a way to get the victory, right? Is a way to get the victory and not accepting defeat. That is, I think, very much so. So, humility is very important. Rather than talking about the good qualities, if we practice the good qualities, then those with eyes, the fortunate ones will gradually understand. They will know. Those who needs to know will know, and that's fine. That's a good thing. Those who need to know will eventually know. You cannot hide that, right? You cannot hide that. When people abuse us and slanders us, we have to understand, why they are abusing us, why they are spreading bad word, why. Usually, I think we don't think like this, right? If someone abuses us, we immediately think of how to react. But we don't think about why they're abusing us, you know. Just as we have problems, you know, just as we have jealousy, then the other person also has jealousy. Just as we abuse people, the other person might also be abusing us. We might think that we have not abused someone or have slandered someone. Well, obviously we are not doing it right now, but if you have good memory, then I think we have abused someone at some point. It could have been many months back, many years. And many times it doesn't take much motivation to abuse someone, you know. When we are angry and out of anger, we use some words, usually I think they are abusive to a certain extent, you know. But we don't realize that we are using abusive words, that we are using hateful speech. You know, we are not aware of that because of our anger. In a state of anger, we are not self-aware, right? We just react. We are completely engulfed in anger. So these things that sometimes we fall victim to, we have we have very much also victimized others, right? So similarly, when someone else does that to us, then we are somewhat equal in that way also. So defeat here is not reacting angrily at abuse, slander, scorn, and so forth. Because in a worldly way, if you don't react, then they say you are defeated, right? You lost. They would say that. In a worldly way, if you react negatively and if you really like beat them, you know, figuratively, then you are declared the winner, right? But in reality, is that really the case? Maybe there are no winners, you know. When there is a strong confrontation, when there is a war, a battle, maybe there are no winners. All those who take part in that, in so much hatred, how can there be a winner in such hatred, right? Likewise, when two people are reacting to each other in an angry way, in a hateful way, who is the winner? So the person who is able to control himself or herself is the winner. And the person who is losing it, obviously, has lost it, right? Is the loser. So when people treat you with abuse, slander, then whatever happens, don't lose it. Don't lose it. Just don't lose your cool, right? This is very important, yeah? This is very important. Don't lose your balance. This is important. Because if you lose your balance, then you're losing your mind, You lose your mind. You lose any senses that might be in you. You lose all your senses. Because in a state of anger, strong hatred, nothing makes sense. Your reaction would make no sense. You lose perspective when you are angry. In a state of rage, what you might do may harm lots of people. Not only the person that was abusing or slandering you, but in a state of strong rage, you might harm their family, people that were connected to them, that played no part in that abuse. People that might have the skin color to them, people that are completely disconnected from your situation. All of that happens because of one thing: hatred, anger, just senseless rage, right? So it's very important that we think about the drawbacks of anger, right? The drawbacks of anger, and then work with our mind so that we can react, if not in a positive way, but in a less negative way. Because in order to have, I think, a happy life, you must know how to deal with anger, right? If you don't know how to deal with anger, then you wouldn't know how to achieve happiness. So this is why so much of the verses here, I think, are teaching us how to deal with anger. It's like if someone wants to get a PhD, then you obviously have to concentrate on your studies. You have to, get credit, whatever, you have to do those things. But then there are also a list of things that you shouldn't do, right? Because if you do those things, then they will inhibit you from finishing your studies. So this is something similar, that if you want a happy life, then anger is something that you should learn to control, right? To subvert. Is that okay? Subvert. So And then in Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charyavatara, I think in the chapter on patience, he states that there is no non-virtuous action like anger, right? That anger is the most powerful of the delusions in the way that it is self-destructive and it directly harms others, that it directly harms beings. So instead of reacting negatively, then we just try to react in a positive way and let the other have victory, you know. And now with the next verse, when someone I have benefited and in whom I have placed great trust hurts me very badly, I will practice seeing that person as my Supreme Lama. This is something that I think happens, you know, in our life. You know, as a child, I think most of us, we would really hold our parents, you know, and we place great trust in our parents. But sometimes they may hurt us, you know. They may hurt us inadvertently, right? Inadvertently, sorry. I sometimes get the emphasis wrong. Inadvertently. Okay. But still, we feel the hurt. And as we grow up, you know, many of us who have spouses or partners, we place great trust in them. And they sometimes also, through their speech or through their carelessness, they might hurt us also. So, like in the 5th verse, then we again accept defeat and offer victory to them. and try to see the person as someone, like your Lama. Just as our Lama teaches us Dharma, explains us the teachings of the Buddha, shows us the way of a higher state of being or a higher state of mind. This person is also showing us something, is also teaching us something, teaching us how to be patient, teaching us how to be patient. Because if we don't come into contact with a person who hurts us, then how can we ever practice patience? If we don't come across a person who hurts us, how do we know that we are practicing patience? How do we know whether the time we spent on trying to meditate on patience, whether that we may have meditated on patience, but we have not put that to test, right? We have not put that to test. So the person who hurts us is the perfect opportunity to really know if we were successful in meditating on patience or not, In the Mahayana path, the most important path to enlightenment are the 6 perfections, right? The 6 perfections. And patience is one of them. And practicing patience, of course, you may be alone in a room and you may meditate on the 6 perfections, including patience. But if you're alone in your room with no one to create any disturbances, then it may be easy to practice patience alone, right? So His Holiness always tells this story, right, of this meditator who has been meditating on patience for very long, up there in the mountains. So one day, this meditator, comes comes to visit the village and meets someone. So this person asks the meditator, what he had been doing, and he said, "Oh, I have been meditating, for a few years, something like that." So the person asked him, what was he meditating on? And he said, patience, right? Patience. So this person, he was quite smart, He wanted to test this meditator. And then he said, suddenly, so he said, "So you have been meditating patience, right?" And he said, yes, with some certain level of arrogance, with some pride, he said, yes, yes. Then he said a very bad word to him, like, "You go to hell," something like that. Then immediately the meditator reacted angrily and said, "You go to hell." Right? So all these years of meditating on patience, and then when you meet the first person that abuses you, then this is how you react, right? So patience, to really meditate on patience, to practice patience, then we need a person that we can practice patience with, And if we can, when we meet a person who hurts us, and if we can see that opportunity, as a chance to practice our patience, then I think we will not react negatively. One way of practicing patience is by contemplating the drawbacks of anger, by contemplating on the drawbacks of anger, right? And how not wanting the subsequent pain and reacting negatively to the abuse are actually contradictive, right? How they contradict each other. How that there really is not much purpose in anger, and how the drawbacks are negative. For that reason, then that is a reason why we should not react so negatively. How even a moment of strong anger can destroy, the seeds of virtuous acts that we have accumulated for many years. How by becoming angry, we lose our senses, that we lose perspective, right? we know that anger is not a good thing, but we don't really think about it, right? We don't sort of devote some time in thinking about the drawbacks of anger. We know it, and that's it, We take that for granted, sort of thing, It's something like you don't want to know it twice. If you know it once, then that's it. You stop and you're good, right? That sort of approach we have. But the more you think about the drawbacks of anger, the more you think about the drawbacks of anger, if you are I think that if you really understand the drawbacks of anger, then you will not react in such a negative way, right? Because as I said, we know it just once, right? But at the point of when we are close to becoming angry, usually we are not thinking about the drawbacks of anger. Yeah? And if you are more mindful, if you sort of devote a few minutes of your daily life thinking about the drawbacks of your anger, then it makes it easier that at the crucial moment you will immediately be able to anticipate what might happen if you react in a negative way, right? So this is the good thing about thinking one thing over and over and over again. In a way, we become experts at it, right? We become experts, and we then become experts in the application of that, right? Everyone, even a little child would know, after some education, would know that anger is not a good thing, right? But of course, you can think, did I think about the drawbacks of anger today? Did I think about the drawbacks of anger yesterday? And then it could get interesting, if you sort of count those days. So again, we have to think, yeah? We have to think, and we have to apply and take some time, Despite our busy schedule, we have to just remember, these points. We have to remember these advices, and these advices, I think, have a very practical message. They can be so practical. It's not some high thing, but it is something that is of great use in a practical way. If you think about the drawbacks of anger, then I think this is almost like meditating on patience. That meditator who reacted angrily after devoting lots of time in the meditation of anger, probably didn't think much about the drawbacks of anger, but was trying to probably meditate on patience as one would meditate on compassion, just trying to on the mind, but not really sort of thinking about the whys and the other aspects, right? It seems like practicing compassion and practicing patience is quite different. You can practice compassion alone in your room, but if you're alone in your room, can you practice patience? Maybe you could, you could sort of think about the time that someone said some hurtful things to you, at you, and if you can stop, the anger from arising, that is then, that is meditating on patience, right? That is the practice. That is a practice of patience. As negative thoughts arise, as angers arise, any moment that you can stop, and if you can stop the anger from arising or even from sort of continuing, if you can stop the continuation of your anger, then that is the practice of patience, right? So even being alone, you can still practice patience. So any form of stopping anger from arising is patience. Then does Buddha have patience? He has no anger, so he doesn't need to stop anger from arising. Does he have patience or not? Or does an arhat, right, who has completely extinguished the roots of anger, does he have patience or not? Maybe those high beings may not need to stop anger from arising, but still they have a quality, that as they were on the path of learning, that practice of stopping anger has sort of completed, It has realized its full potential. Yeah? And that is the patience of a Buddha or an arhat. So it's in a different form. Okay, so at this point, maybe we can take some time off and reflect on these two words. The first about accepting defeat, offering the victory to others. And the second about practice seeing the person who has hurt us, seeing the person as a teacher on how to practice patience. And with this, then we can think about the drawbacks of anger. How anger has a tendency to destroy, how it directly causes harm. And by contemplating these drawbacks, then the advantage of practicing patience and the happiness that derives from stopping anger from arising. So maybe we take a few moments off and reflect on these points. Okay. So Now what? So maybe if you would like to add something, share something, or just a question, you can put it in any forms.
Oh, okay. I have a question on.
Oh, I think maybe we wait. It's coming.
Oh. Sorry. Yes, Rinpoche. I have a question on number 5, second line. It says, mistreat me with abuse. Now, does this mean more verbal abuse? What about physical abuse? If someone's being physically abused over and over again, shouldn't they try to defend themselves in some way?
I think the thing is that I think the best thing is that like to run away, to get out of the place, right? To get far from the person. I think that would be a good idea. You can defend, but maybe offense is not a good thing at that time.
Right.
Not hit back. Maybe you can try to block, but you don't have to hit back, right?
But usually some abusers will continue and continue for years and years. You see this
for years.
Yeah, sometimes in marriages, some
like
people,
physical abuse.
Physical abuse, yeah.
Then I think you need to call the police. You know? I mean, if this is a situation, this is serious, you know.
Right.
If you're in that situation, you know, you don't get out your 8 verses on Lojong. You don't do that. You just dial 911. You know? There's no question about it. You know? Really, yeah.
Sometimes it's not that simple.
Well, dialing and calling the police is more simple than, you know, thinking about the 8 verses.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, but abuse, like I know, like in this country, especially with women, been abused in marriages and stuff. It's hard to explain, but they get kind of sucked into their abuser.
They get sucked?
Yeah, they just accept being abused, and they're not going to call the police. It happens a lot.
Do they know that they are being abused?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So my question is...
Yeah. Yes, not just this country.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, yeah, I just know this country. Mm-hmm. But sometimes some people will accept them as being abused. They're so... they're not happy with it, but they're just kind of like in this role, and then they feel kind of stuck. And so it's hard for them to kind of even get the energy up to even call the police or ask for help because they're...
like if they're blackmailed, right, or something like that?
Not so much blackmail, more... what's that? Traumatized, thank you. Yeah, traumatized. So then what? They're so traumatized by the event.
So your question is then, how do you help them?
Right, exactly.
Not like, how should they react to that, right?
Right.
Then I think this is quite different. Now, your question is different, right? It's not like, how should that person deal with verse number 5? This is more like, how should we, right, as Dharma practitioners, try to help the person should we come into contact with them, right? How do we help them? Then, okay, the first thing before we try to help them is that we have to know whether they want our help or not, Many times I think, some of the victims, even they don't want help, They don't want help, right? It could be a situation like, let's say, substance abuse, if they are addicted to some drugs, to some substances, then it's likely that even though the person is being abused, the person realizes it, but the person may not be so receptive of help obviously because of the addiction, right? So in that case, then it is very difficult because they are not making an effort from themselves, right? They don't. Maybe they think they are helpless. Maybe they think this situation cannot be changed, right? Maybe they believe that their addiction is so strong that they cannot get out of that phase. Then I think even though we cannot directly help them, I think we have to try to do everything we can first to convince that it is possible that they can get out of that addiction, that they can free themselves of that addiction. I think this is the first thing that we should do. In other similar situations, I think if we find someone that they're not receptive of help, that they don't believe it's possible that they could become free, then to try to convince them that that is not the case, or if that's not possible, at least try to instill some doubt, Try to change them from that holding so tightly onto that view that they are beyond help, that their situation is unchangeable. Try to do anything to sort of first instill some doubt, Share them stories of how people manage to get off their addictions, to get out of how they became free from someone who was physically abusing them for years and years. There are stories, I think. So we have to share those stories and give them some hope, This is important because if the person is hopeless, then we cannot help them directly, They will not be receptive. So in that case, first, try to give them many examples, right? Try to share those stories. They're not some made-up stories, but they are real stories, And if those people manage to become free from that terrible situation, that addiction, then it's possible that this person can also have the same life, you know. So like this, I think we have to help, you know. We have to help. So if one method doesn't work, then always try to use a different method. And like I said, it just takes some imagination from your side, you know. You just need to do some thought experiments, and you will find a way. If you have hope in yourself, you know, that is the most important thing, then it is possible that you can also give hope to the person in need. So I think this is very important. I'm sorry that I first sort of like made this sort of like gave like a joke answer, right? But this is really serious. And when you first asked me the question, I didn't understand the question. Yeah, I didn't understand what you really meant. So if this is the case, then we have to be, it is a challenge, and that's, you know, when you are faced with a challenge, then instead of losing hope, I think it gives hope, right? Then it's like you have a problem, so how do you solve that problem? This is our approach. You know, this has to be our approach. That if we are faced with a problem, instead of being overcome by that, instead we should view it, you know, like a problem-solving thing, you know, something that we can test some of our theories, you know, whether those theories really work or not. It should be seen as an opportunity to do that, you know, to extend our help, to it should be ultimately it should be seen as an opportunity to benefit a sentient being. So I think if any of us, you know, if we come into contact with such a person in this situation, then we should then really gather our strength. When we hear this story, it's important that we don't lose hope for them, but that we then draw more strength from hearing that story. You know, this is very important. Yes, thank you.
So I've been doing some odd jobs. I was on the roof today, and I was patching the garage roof. And yesterday I was working on the patio, planting flowers, and there's this bicycle out there. It's always in the way. It's like a dinosaur. The tires are flat. It's rusting away. And it belongs to our best neighbors, the relatives next door. And so I'm always pushing the relatives, why don't you lock it up in back of your house? And they said, well, our other bike got stolen off the front steps. And I said, of course. They cut the lock. Any bike will be stolen here in Long Beach off the front steps. So still I'm suffering because of the bike. But then sitting here tonight, I got the idea I could put it on the garage roof, you know. So the bike is still here. So, but then my patio's clean, okay? So I'm just an example, offering the victory to others, okay?
That's so beautiful, you know. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I have a question about greed and envy. And I think many studies show, first of all, that the desire is, first of all, is physiological. not just mental, but there is actually, when you start thinking about it, it also has some changes in your body chemistry. Okay? And the second thing is that it is the desire to get something that is much more satisfactory than the actual getting. That studies show also, once you got it, I mean, it's like kids with toys, you know, you got the toy, you know, 3 seconds later, they want another toy. Okay, so I'd like to ask you to explain how you approach those sort of more the physiological issue, the body chemistry change, how you address that in mind training, because you're not really, I know there's tumo practice, but how do you address something like that which is so prevalent in our society?
That's very interesting. These chemistry changes, I think, from a Buddhist point of view, they would be considered influenced, right? Influenced by desire. But they wouldn't. Those chemical changes are not desire. Yeah, they are not considered desire. Desire is always on the non-physical level, right? It could be a consciousness or a factor of consciousness, a mental factor. Am I okay? Is this loud enough? Yes. Okay. I think this is always like the Buddhist answer. When we have strong emotions, then it changes us physically, you know. It brings some change somewhere, right? We know that when someone is very angry, maybe the heart pumps faster, right? And then we have more red, or maybe when someone has lots of fear, then the hairs they raise, right? My voice is okay? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So in Buddhism, we don't go beyond that. You know, what happens on the more subtle physical level, we don't go there, right? But again, for those changes, you know, for those changes that we can see with our eyes, for those physical changes to take place, something has to take place also on the more subtle level, on the more subtle physical level. So I think, you know, if it is clear that, you know, through modern technology, through devices, that we can detect these changes when, you know, and that we can see that these reactions are related with some kinds of emotions, then we would attribute that, you know, and we wouldn't say that that is desire or fear or whatever, but we would say that that happened as a result of having fear, that happened as a result of having desire, something like that, right? So this is the Buddhist answer, I could say. Could you remind me of your question?
So if I can just respond, so if that's the result of having desire, a physiological, biochemical change, okay, but then that continues to drive the mental state for desire. I mean, it's sort of a loop. So how do you kind of cut
Okay, so in Buddhism, I wouldn't say that those chemical reactions sort of drive whatever, but I would say whatever caused those chemical reactions in the first place was the real thing that sort of led to that whole drive or that changed the course, right? So we would always link that to the thing that instigated all of that physical changes, right? So it's not really the chemical imbalance, whatever, that is the one that really changes our mood, but it is what started all that reaction in the first place, which was desire. They are sort of given the responsibility of changing the course, of whatever happens afterwards. So the Buddhists would attribute that mainly to the motivation, to the force, to the non-physical. They would attribute that to the consciousness. So you're saying that, okay, when people have desire, then there are certain chemical reactions, right? Something like that. And then you mentioned that as a result of having those, what do you call, the reactions, then that could sort of like raise the dopamine or like decrease or something like that, right? So we wouldn't say it is really, what do you call, that chemical in whatever preceded that was the central factor in the release of those, but we would say that it was desire, and after desire, then you had a point of like going down, and when you go down, when you sort of dive, that's when these dopamine level go up and down, So we would correlate mainly with desire, and desire then directly, when you don't get the desire, then you go through a down phase, and that's really what happens. And when you go through a down phase, then the dopamine level goes down. It goes down, right? It goes down. It's not because the dopamine level went down that you went down, but because you went down, your mind went down, then the dopamine level then goes down. So we would probably say it like that. But again, if you were to sort of test that in a laboratory, it's really hard to say. It's really hard to say when the dopamine level, it's really hard to say, right? Okay, so the dopamine level went down. And then we ask the person, oh, how are you feeling? Obviously, the person would say, not good, right? But we won't be able to say when the person felt bad and when the dopamine level went down. How can you really say through a device, through a very advanced scientific device, how can you really pinpoint that, right? You cannot. With scientific devices, you can only see the dopamine level going down, but you don't really see the happiness level going down, right? So this, I think, is very difficult. We can sort of, in a way, it's like inferring that the person is not happy because the dopamine level is down, right? So we would say that happens afterwards. It's really the mind that sort of affects the body, even though it is possible that body can also, it's also the other way around. It is possible, yeah. Especially in Tantra, as you go into higher Tantra, then the divide between the physical and the non-physical, then it becomes thinner, and then it's like you're in a paradox, right? Whereas in the lower schools, then it's more clear cut, and we would usually give more importance to the mind rather than physical properties. But again, ultimately, then I think it's really interesting when we think of wind, the wind energy, and consciousness, how they are so. It's like they're two sides of the coin, right? They're like two sides of the same coin. It's almost like they are the two truths in a way, the conventional existence and the ultimate existence sort of thing. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, I know so little of science and Buddhism that I think I can sort of only like have a theory, right? But really not know it for a fact, because my understanding of both these two domains is so limited. But that is, if I had to sort of like defend, the Buddhist way or the Buddhist answer, then I would like answer it like this. Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for your answers, Rinpoche. My question is about patience. I'm wondering what the fine line between being patient and being passive is. To what degree do we practice patience? Say we are the abused, and we give the victory to somebody else. We graciously accept that defeat as a lesson learned. How often or how much can we take it, until we're actually enabling the abuser to continue on, and that victory is no longer good for them, and we are just suffering or trying to endure that with patience.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your answer, and also for helping me, because last night I was trying to think of this word being passive, but it didn't come in my mind. I was thinking, and then I just left it. But now that you said it, now I know the term again, right? So being patient and being passive, I think we have to differentiate, right? Being patient is always a good thing. Being passive is not always a good thing to do. Especially like as the situation that you gave, then it's important that it's not a good thing to just be passive and then let the abuser, continue to abuse. That's not a good thing. But being patient doesn't mean that you let the abuser, continue the abuse. Being patient means that you have to not react in anger, right? Not react in anger, not react in a state of hatred. This is the definition. This is how you characterize being patient, right? That's how you characterize patience. Of course, I think it's easier to explain patience than to practice patience, right? Obviously, but that is how patience is defined, yeah. And it's always a positive thing. And in any way, I don't think being patient would not be the right thing to do, right? There is no situation where being patient wouldn't have been the right thing to do, wouldn't have been the right option. But of course, being passive is not necessarily a good thing. So being patient, patience is not about being passive. It's not passiveness. Passiveness? Passivity. Okay. So patience is not passivity, right? Many times, if you're not careful, then when we say, "Oh, please be patient," people say, "Please be patient." It's like, wait, don't do anything, just sit there, don't do anything. But that's how we really, interpret patience as, in a conventional sense, right? We always say, "Oh, be patient, wait here," right? Like, don't do anything. But here in the Lojong, then that's not how we understand patience. But it's so patience. It's a bit like when people say be patient, just wait, right? But instead we are sort of like telling our anger, be patient, wait. So we are like trying to tell our anger, don't get up, just be cool. Don't get up, something like that. So really, this is to stop anger from arising. But many times, anger doesn't take much to be angry, right? It's like in a few seconds, right? Just in a few moments, before you realize it, you are angry. So how do you deal with that? And would thinking about the drawbacks of anger help that situation? Well, you cannot say it won't if you don't try it, right? You cannot say it won't help if you don't make an effort thinking about the drawbacks of anger. So, first, we have to try it, We have to try it. And by trying it, if we see even a little improvement, even a little tiny improvement, if we see that we can control ourselves in a more senseful way, then it shows that it is possible, Then it shows that this is the right way, that something is working, right? So we have to first try this for ourselves before we reach any conclusion, right? So we have to work on that. We have to And like we talked about yesterday, also using the verbs is very important. Using how we use words, how we choose certain words, that also can alter your state, right? It can also alter your mental state. And that which in turn could change, how you react in that situation. So, like this. Was there another question? Oh.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment about women that are abused, is they frequently find themselves in a situation where they're being abused for many, many years throughout their marriage, and they have a very, very low sense of self-esteem because the spouse constantly tells them they're useless
and that there's nothing that they can do, they're good for nothing. And that becomes ingrained into them, and it's called like a battered spouse syndrome. And women that are caught in that cycle, they feel helpless and like they're economically trapped. And in what I do, I've found very little success in getting those people out of that situation, because they constantly return to their spouses and face more and more abuse. And I've seen women that have been beaten to a pulp by their husbands, and they go back to their husbands. So I find it difficult to deal with those situations, because it doesn't seem anything that I can do will help.
Yeah. Yeah. You said that they went back to their spouse who were abusing them, right? So this is out of their own volition, then what can we do, right? And you had a question? I did. Oh. Yes. The last question.
In 1977, I started the first legal counseling clinic in the country for battered women. So it's a syndrome that's very common. It's not just in this country, it's everywhere. But it's very complicated what goes on and why this is so. But I was so happy when you said, in response to Steve's question, even though you misunderstood it initially, when you said call 911, because I'm a lawyer, so I'm very literal left brain, and I take things literally to a fault. So, for example, I read verse 5. And I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not too much, frankly. I would read that and I would think, oh, there's a part of me that would think, no, you don't call 911. You just give the victory to the abuser and accept defeat, and so this is what my question is. The way, over the years of trying to understand this stuff better, I think, if I'm understanding it correctly, that what we're really talking about is not how you physically respond. In other words, call 911, that's a physical action. But while you're calling 911, you're doing it with equanimity. I mean, ideally. In other words, that person's beating you or yelling at you or whatever. Internally, what they're talking about in verse 5 is that internally your mind is in that state, but it shouldn't affect how you take action, because His Holiness always talks about skillful means. And I think, and I don't know, I sometimes wonder if it's just Western culture versus Eastern culture, that we understand things so differently than the people who wrote these texts. So, and I don't know if I'm right about this, but I guess I'll speak for myself. I feel like I respond with a mind that is very different than the mind. Well, I mean, I'm not talking about enlightened or unenlightened, but I mean the way of thinking of the people all these great lamas who wrote these texts. And I'm just wondering, do you think that's true? And am I also right about the internal state versus the action that you take, like calling 911 or walking away or running away or whatever?
you have to be patient with me because when Steve asked me the question the first time, I couldn't really understand it, right? So I'm now having a similar moment. I didn't fully understand your question. So can you can you put it in a more simpler form for me?
So question number one, because it's kind of a twofold. Question number one is, if you interpret this literally,
Right.
let's say somebody's beating you up.
Okay.
So if you interpret it literally, at least my literal interpretation would be that you just let them beat you up and you accept the defeat and you give the victory. And so, like someone talked about enabling another's bad behavior. In essence, that's what you're doing. So the way I'm now understanding this is a different way, which is that.
Oh, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think this was the intent
Yeah.
of the writer, that if someone beats you, you just let them beat you and you just sit there. That's not what it means by giving victory. Giving victory is that don't react in an angry way, you know. You can run,
Yeah.
you know, you can get out of the place so that the beating will stop. It's not like you're letting the person just beat you until he or she is tired or whatever, you know. It's not like that. But what it means is that now I think we are coming up with such extreme examples that I am beginning to have some doubts, you know, that it says here first, mistreat me with abuse, slander, and scorn. So I don't know the exact word for abuse in Tibetan, you know, but I doubt that this is like really bad physical abuse. I don't think this is the case.
Well, even forget physical. Even somebody who's just
Verbally.
verbally abusing you,
Okay,
and it's
okay.
really abusive.
Yeah.
So let's take away the physical.
Okay.
Just probably what the text is referring to.
Okay.
Even in that situation.
Right. Even in that situation, then accepting defeat is not like answering to them, right? Not coming with a rebuke. Rebuke, is that the word? Rebuke, you know? If someone says a bad, hurtful statement to you, you don't react, you know? You don't react angrily. You don't react in a negative way. And you can just say, all right, you won. You know, simply you can just say, you won, you know? You won the debate. Perhaps this is how we could interpret this. But when you have, you know, this very unfortunate situations, so unfortunate, then I think only if Geshe Langri Tangpa was here, would he able to sort of then clarify, you know, what this means. I don't want to speculate too much, you know, because I'm limited, and in my limitation also extends to how, you know, Geshe Langri Tangpa would react to this situation that you mentioned. Generally, I would like to think of this situation, you know, the one with abuse, slander, and scorn, as something that most of us, or like most people, would experience. I will not think of it as something like an extreme example of abuse, an extreme example of slander, an extreme example of scorn. I don't think this practice of accepting defeat and offering the victory is applicable in that particular moment, you know. Then there is a different way. But this is for something that for most of us who, this is the kind of level that, the kind of abuse, the kind of slander, the kind of scorn that most people know and have experienced and have also reacted angrily. So this really refers to that. I think this is just my interpretation. And your second part?
Well, so the second question was just more, with many teachings, I sometimes think that, we in Western culture have, idiosyncratic ways of understanding things that are very different from an Eastern mind. And so sometimes I feel, I mean, I'll speak for myself, I feel like as a Westerner, I misinterpret things, I should say. I misinterpret what the real meaning of something really is, as opposed to what the words are saying, because of my cultural background. And I'm just wondering, if you feel that is somewhat true, if you've observed that, or not necessarily a cultural misinterpretation sometimes because of cultural differences.
Now again, I'm also having the first moment sort of thing. Now with the second question, I'm like a little. Can you again put it more in a more simpler form, please?
So, have you observed when you're in the West teaching?
Okay.
That we, because of our cultural background, tend to misinterpret the meaning, the actual intention of what is being instructed versus students, in India.
No,
you don't.
No, not
you
at
don't.
all.
Okay.
Not at all.
I guess it's just my personal problem.
Yeah. But you see, but when I said not at all, I think you're right. But you are truthful, right? Just because we have not accepted that I have misinterpreted something doesn't mean that I have not, right? So it doesn't matter, like with these teachings, this can be misinterpreted by anyone, regardless of their background, regardless, even if they are born in a family where everyone is very, has very strong faith in the Dharma and really encourages studying the Dharma. That doesn't mean that you will understand everything. That doesn't mean that you will not misinterpret the teachings. And even if you stay, in a monastic university, and after many years of learning so many texts, right, you could come across some text, and then, just like I misinterpreted verse number 5, anyone could also misinterpret, right? So we have to, when we interpret the teachings, then I think we should always never forget the fact that it needs to be applied to our practices. It needs to be applied to us, to our situation. So we can always, maybe with your background as a lawyer, you have, you really want to analyze this, analyze from all possible directions and then compare it and then bring in every possible situations. But then the important thing is that we should try to apply this in our situation, or the most people's situation, and then how would we react, right? So like these things, then I think we have to interpret in such a way so that it is practical for us and that it is manageable for us, right? That we can then manage. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.